आप सबका स्वागत एवं अभिनंदन करते हुए मैं सुधीर अत्यंत हर्षित हूँ। आज का यह सारस्वत सत्र हमारे केंद्र की स्थापना के 30 साल पूरे होने के उपलक्ष्य में आयोजित महोत्सव का एक छोटा सा पर महत्वपूर्ण हिस्सा है। 30 साल चाहे व्यक्ति के हों या संस्था के, एक परिपक्वता की ओर ले जाने वाली अवधि कही जा सकती है। तो इस अवसर पर ऐसे भव्य महोत्सव का आयोजन युक्तियुक्त है। और जैसा आप सब जानते होंगे, उत्सव शब्द वस्तुतः संस्कृत में उत उपसर्ग पूर्वक सब शब्द से निष्पन्न है। सब का अर्थ होता है दुख, तो दुखों का निवारण करने वाला जो है वो उत्सव होता है, अर्थात खुशी फैलाने वाला। मैंने कहा था कि छोटा सा पर महत्वपूर्ण। छोटा सा इसलिए कि केवल लगभग 2 घंटे चलेगा ये सत्र। महत्वपूर्ण इसलिए कि इन 2 घंटों में हमें कुछ ऐसे प्रतिष्ठित, प्रबुद्ध एवं विचारशील विशेषज्ञों को सुनने का अवसर मिलेगा जिन्होंने अपने अपने क्षेत्र में अपनी पहचान बनाई है, और ये एक ऐसे विषय पर हमें आलोकित करेंगे जो हम सबसे संबद्ध है, पर जिस पर अभी एक सुव्यवस्थित संवाद का अभाव है। ये विषय है माई आइडिया ऑफ न्यू इंडिया।
We suffer from a sense of nostalgia. Good, bad, or indifferent. You cannot go back home. घर लौट के जा नहीं सकते. Some of us want to go back 5,000 years back. Some of us want to go back 10 years back, 20 years back, 30 years back. But you cannot have your cell phones and go back 5,000 years back. You cannot have your cell phones and go back 20 years back. You cannot go back home. We have to learn to live with change. And I think that is the key thing which I want India to be comfortable with. Because it is not something which is new. We know that as a people, and I was thinking as to whether I should say this in this gathering. But I'm going to say it nonetheless, that we know as a people that we believe in our tradition. And I'll give you my example, and I can only speak from my example considering the topic of my vision of a new India. Ansari ji was talking about his background in Indore. I was brought up in a very Bengali household in Calcutta. But like a good Bengali Bhadralok, and I say this when I am speaking here, I also say from the fact that I come from my own locality. That is, I come from I agree, from a privileged, to a certain extent, westernized Bengali Bhadralok background. We were brought up to be deeply Bengali. So we were brought up on Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, we were brought up on Rabindranath Thakur, we were brought up on Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay. These were part of our regular lives. And not only that, we were brought up on Shukumar Rai, which is a nonsense verse. It was part of our daily life. We were brought up on our pujas on every Tuesday. We were brought up sitting on the ground. I was brought up in a joint family. But we were also told at that point of time that you have to be able to be comfortable to live with the West as well. And I always say this, that's why my understanding is different. Like my father was an orthopedic surgeon, and he had spent 10 years in Britain working, and he had come back to India. He had given up. Once he came back, he refused to go back. He spent all his time, and at that point of time I used to have huge fights with him on this, saying I always used to tell him that, you haven't lived for us. But he spent most of his time working for the poor. And he said, it's up to your fate. If you can take care of yourself, you will take care of yourself. I've given you a good education. But the fact of the matter was, in the end, he was quintessentially Bengali. It is not that he was not comfortable with the benefits of the West, or what is to be learned from the West. But he was also very comfortable with his tradition, with his culture, with him being himself. And it is this India which I look forward to India becoming. This is not new. This dilemma which we are facing today is not new. All of us, I am inspired by Swami Vivekananda. It's very difficult to lead the life in the way he led it, or even come close to what he said. It is very difficult. But I find myself greatly inspired. And Swami Vivekananda himself was very conscious of this challenge that we are going to face. And he wrote a number of times about this. He said that our future, on two things. He said our future is between the Scylla and Charybdis, as he said, between one of great development, huge amount of development, physical development, of equality, of egalitarianism, of freedom, and the other is the great spirituality, our tradition, our 5,000-year-old culture. And he says, on both sides we are torn. And he says that in the end, our future has to be somewhere in the middle. And so, what I believe is, as we need to do, is what he suggested. He said, whether it be your tradition, or whether it be the great freedom of the West, you have to test everything. Anything which does not stand the test of rationality, you have to discard. So even within our traditions, if there is something which does not stand the test of rationality, that we should not even think twice about discarding. But we have to be deeply rooted to our culture, our tradition. As again Swamiji said, that you cannot be something else. I think the easiest way for you to realize, and I realize this, that you cannot be something else is to live in the West. It is all nice here when we are studying, and I studied in my father sent me to a very good private school, so I studied in English, and we all aspired to be anglicized. But the easiest way to get that ghost beaten out of you is to live in the West. Once you live in the West, you realize that you are you can never be them. It is not possible. You cannot think like them, you cannot eat like them, and you know fundamentally that you become yourself. And so that we have to be rooted in ourselves, our traditions, our culture. It is what makes us who we are. And I think if India loses that, it loses its essential spirit of who it is. So we have to have both. And I am in no nostalgia that everything in the past was good. There are a lot of things in the past was bad. And we have to be willing to discard it. But there are two things which I want, two broad things which I want which I look forward to a great India of my dreams. There are a large number of smaller things, of course, which again are wonderful if we look after our parents, and these are very concrete values. But broadly, there are two things which I would look forward to my new India for. One is the elimination of privilege, again which Swamiji talked about. When Swamiji talked about equality, he talked about that you have to eliminate privilege. Being wealthy is per se not bad. Being socially higher is per se not bad. But the privilege which goes with that, the fact that we use the benefit of who we are to exploit others to the wall, that is what we have to fight against. The accumulated privilege we have to fight against. And it is very essential that we do it, especially in India when difference between groups are increasing. People are becoming very conscious about their identity. I think the only way to solve that is we have to get rid of our privileges. And on the flip side of it, we are a very diverse country. We have to accept this diversity. And that is another thing which I'm going to, again, I was thinking whether I should say this, but this is something which needs to be told, and this is something which I think I should say, since it's something like New India, which is so close to my heart, is in this India, we are a diverse people. I come from a Shakta Bengali background. The goddess is worshipped with, I'm saying with meat. We have prasad on Navami day. This is not unusual. We have to be willing, and we are very proud of our culture. We are very proud of our history. We are very proud of our rituals. You should be willing to accept that, and that is what has made us. We have lasted for 5,000 years when stronger cultures, bigger civilizations have disappeared like dust on the wind. So this essential identity of being able to be accommodative of the future while being rooted to our past, that is why we have lasted for 5,000 years. Because the Romans disappeared, the Greeks disappeared, the Egyptians disappeared, the Babylonians disappeared, but we have lasted, and we have lasted against great challenges. And we are, if you draw a straight line right up to 5,000 years, we can draw that. We are not the Greeks, we are not the Persians, but we can draw that. And we, in a single reference, we can talk about people who have for 5,000 years back, and we can talk about someone who is 500 years back, and today there is a single line. That is because we have changed with the times, and we have remained who we are. And that is the last thing which I would like to say, that is the most important thing. That is why nationalism is so important. Nationalism not only in terms of a political idea, but nationalism of the feeling of the people. Today, on one hand, we become very conscious about our limited identities, and on the other hand, as Ansariji said, that we have become extremely individualistic. We are only bothered about our individual lives. As a result, we have become more aggressive of what we want. We want everything for ourselves. But we need to get a sense of community back. I think that is what Ansariji was saying. But the biggest way to get that community back is to bring true nationalism, and not political nationalism merely, but true nationalism into our lives. It's what our grandparents, what our father, what we've always known, that we are one community. And for that, the solution is not for a globalized world. In a globalized world, every person is, the entire world. If the entire world is your neighbor, then you are an individual. We don't need globalization. We need localization. We need to be conscious about our identity. And we need to work as a nation amongst the people, not only politically, but physically. In the end, and this is, since we are all in a hurry, I would just like to summarize that in the end, that we need to realize that a large number of solutions that we want in our world today, in our India today, cannot be found in the tools adopted by the West. And I think, as I said, if the easiest way to realize that is to go and live in the West. And there are no universal solutions. The solutions are within us, within our society. And we have to work towards exploring that. And therefore, I think, when the talk of New India arises, and I'll end by saying this, when the talk of New India arises, I think we can trace the actual word for New India. The entire tract of where New India comes from is that famous speech by Swami Vivekananda, which is very oft quoted, where he said that, very famously, let the new India arise from the fritter seller's house, from the door of the fritter seller, from the lowest of the low. And I think I am inspired that it will arise from that. Because as he always used to say, it is the lowest of the low who are still in touch with their traditions, while a whole load of us who are highest of the high may have slowly lost touch with it. So my new India, which be a much more egalitarian India, a much more diverse India, but an India united and very conscious about its tradition and its roots. Thank you very much.